and that is within the acceptable limits. Madam Speaker, that induction is key because it will also come up with a lot of reduction in cost. When we try to examine what we are going to be borrowed from outside, Madam Speaker, through concessional borrowing, we are looking at borrowing around 14%, semi-concessional borrowing around 3%, and the commercial borrowing out there as 8%. In order for that to happen, Madam Speaker, certain factors must be put in place. And that is the reason why probably we cannot borrow externally a lot. We need stable exchange rates, which I've talked to. Macro fiscal variables that influence international credit must also be in favor, which will allow Kenya, therefore, to access external debts, Madam Speaker, at acceptable rates. The better our credit rating is, the more cheaper, the more we can be preferred as a destination, and then the more we can probably, again, the medium-term debt management strategy, Madam Speaker, take into account several challenges which I would like to highlight. One of them, the sovereign credit rating. Kenya right now, under the credit, they have been able to check the future credit rating gives Kenya a positive outlook, which means we are stable. The other one is the external factors out, which basically control such as market volatility, and this has an influence on the timing and the cost of the debt operations themselves. There's also the increased debt servicing cost, which is important. But having noted those challenges, Honourable Speaker, the strategy goes further to give the...
I'll give you 30 seconds. You don't have the whole...
Just to highlight.
You can't highlight. You want to wind down.
Okay, Honourable Speaker, let me wind down by saying that the strategy indicates an approach to this strategy, those challenges. It doesn't just leave challenges or appreciate their challenges, it gives an approach to these challenges. First of all, centralizing a trade to a single trade repository. This will help us to better do price discovery, which will help us in preparedness. The other one is operationalize the sinking fund. And this, again, is going to help us to reduce risk of borrowing. And finally, the improvement of cash management, which is also going to help us to basically contain the use of overdraft. And overdrafts are normally very expensive. And also, with the other strategy is to sustain fiscal consolidation, which is something that has been happening in this country and is moving towards the reduction of the public debt accumulation. Honourable Speaker, with those very few remarks, I wish to support adoption of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Member for Marakwet East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say I'm a member of the Liaisons Committee, and we had a long discussion with the Treasury on this issue of a medium-term debt management strategy, which is a global practice, Honorable Speaker, on how governments manage their debts. And Mr. Speaker, the debt management in Kenya, for a while, it's been kind of very secretive from the public. And in fact, even many members of this House don't understand how it is being carried out there in Treasury. Mr. Speaker, what we observed is that the country states at this point is at 11.2 trillion, which is equivalent to 65.7% of our GDP, which is way above, it's almost 10% over and above what this House approved, Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight some few issues out of that, what the Treasury presented. That the Treasury, they are going to borrow close to 832 billion Kenya shillings. That is to close the deficit for the financial year 2025-2026. And they are going to do it in foreign and local debts, Honorable Speaker, in terms of 65% from the local and about 35% from the domestic foreign. Mr. Speaker, there is one issue which came out very clearly. That one, as a country, compared to other jurisdictions like in Tanzania and even in Uganda, number one, as a country, we don't have a debt committee as a country. You will find that our debt is just managed by some few individuals in Treasury. And we told Treasury yesterday there is need for the Treasury, the Central Bank, the Office of Controller of Budget. They must have a team, together with the Office of the Attorney General of Kenya. They must have a team which can manage our debts as a country. And number two, the Honorable Speaker, on the debt procurement. This is money we are borrowing. They must be subjected to a procurement process like any other procurement in the country. We have seen that we have a debt of 832, Honorable Speaker. Let Treasury go out and advertise through a public participation. They need to do a public participation and then procure in an open process. So that when we are saying that we are getting from our local banks, KCB, Equity, and this one, at what rate are we getting? Not that just some few individuals may be looking themselves in a room somewhere in Treasury and agree with some CEOs on how this borrowing is going to be done. Number two, the Honorable Speaker, we are saying that we need to digitize the whole debt management system. We have a very robust system, which is the IFMIS system, Honorable Speaker. The IFMIS system is running as a single government payment system, but it is not integrated with the government payroll system. It is not integrated with the government pensions system. It is not integrated with the procurement system. So we want to see, because this is the one single payment entry, we want to see that the government payroll system is integrated with IFMIS so that to do away with the cost workers. It is integrated with e-procurement for transparency and to stop corruption, and also integrated also with our registration system so that when one dies in employment, when it's automatically removed from IRS system, it automatically also removes from the payroll system. And by so doing, Mr. Speaker, we are going to improve on how we manage our debts as a country. I support.
Thank you. Member for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, this is actually a very good development. Debt management strategy has not always been part of the budget process. And I think I've been in this parliament, and at the first term, actually we didn't even touch his second term. Now we started mentioning. If now it has become a normal and regular part of the budget process, that is as it should be. And I really appreciate the work the Liaison Committee has done. Mr. Speaker, debt is normal. Borrowing is important if we have to grow, we have to have development, we have to improve infrastructure, and in that process, you will actually generate jobs, generate businesses, and so you need the debt. Even at personal level, you can never grow if you do not borrow. But as much as it is necessary, it also has got a risk that if you borrow without a clear way of using that, the money you have borrowed, you will definitely have a problem. It will derail the economy. Therefore, a debt management strategy is a must, which will help us to actually set up thresholds like the debt to GDP ratio. Honestly, if you're borrowing, it must depend on what you are generating. If you have a threshold that guides you on that, that is extremely important, and that's what this does. Mr. Speaker, if you have issues like fiscal deficit to GDP, when you are doing the budget, the gap between what we have and what we want must be related to what we can generate. So if those parameters are guiding us, and that is what the management strategy is, it is actually important. And if you have a threshold between external and domestic debt, we may think that the big problem is external debt, but domestic debt is a problem on its own. One, it crowds out borrowing for local businesses. Two, the interests are more expensive. So in the end, it hurts you. So if you have a clear criteria that we do not go beyond this ratio, I think for that, I think we should have this. And now I like the recommendations that actually have come out here, that the automated debt management system. I mean, if you have an automated system, Mr. Speaker, it will definitely reduce graft. It also reduces discretion, because without an automated system, people use their own discretion. People use their own whims. But if you have an automated system, it actually checks them. They have to go against it. And once that is done, somebody will pick it. So having automated system is extremely important. And then if you have this automated system of managing your debt, you have to link it with how you are using the money. So if you have an automated financial management system, like IFMIS that we have, you link it with all aspects of financial expenditure. You link it to the procurement. You link it to human resource. And now you even link it to debt. It is easier at that point to get things done properly. And Mr. Speaker, I like the recommendation of having Treasury single account. It is ridiculous that actually you are borrowing your own money because your other agencies are banking in the banking, and you go to that same bank and you borrow. So you are actually borrowing your money at a higher risk. And so that is something I really think is a good thing. And if we develop, we also establish criteria as recommended here of assessing effective utilization of the borrowed money. That is as it should be. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I support this, and I recommend the committee for coming with this, and it's something which may be part and parcel of our budget process. Thank you.
Okay, Member for Yatta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to the report from the Committee of Liaison. Mr. Speaker, borrowing is not a problem, but the problem is you borrow money and you waste the money. Mr. Speaker, we need to cut wastages and we need to cut theft. Mr. Speaker, Gen Z talked of austerity measures, Mr. Speaker, and even the president banned politicians from participating in Harambes, Mr. Speaker. And then I was shocked just to see the end of state donating 20 million in a church, Mr. Speaker. And you know very well, being the head of state, we respect him. But it's important.
No, because what's out of order?
Honorable Speaker, we are discussing about the medium-term debt management strategy, which is before the House. And I think the honorable member is digressing and is out of order to bring matters that are irrelevant. I don't know whether the country I don't know whether he understands what we are discussing, because what he is actually saying is completely not out of order. It's not relevant to the discussion that is before the House. Could the member be declared to be out of order, Honorable Speaker?
The order. The Honorable Robert, your namesakes.
Yes, give me.
There is Robert Basil and one is Robert Pukose. The younger Robert, could you relate to us what you are saying with the debt strategy?
You know, Mr. Speaker, I respect my namesake, Honorable Pukose. But what I want to remind him, we are talking of medium-term strategy, and we are talking of public debt management system. So if you talk of wastages, that is part of public debt management. It's within the public debt.
No, what is saying, because the rules say that when a member contributes, they must be relevant.
Yes.
Asking how is Harambee contributions relevant to this medium debt strategy? That is the issue.
Yeah, that is why I'm trying to explain to him, because when you see the end of, say, contributing, we are trying to see or to explain, could this money be coming from the public debt? Remember, we borrow money. No, wait a minute.
You are out of order. On that, you're completely out of order. Please proceed and prosecute your point.
Yes, what I was trying, the emphasis I was trying to put across, Mr. Speaker, and I think members need to listen to me carefully, because whatever we do is for generations to come, not for now. So when we talk of public debt management system, we need to use our money prudently, because why borrow money at the same time misuse the money? When I talk about budget, our budget is never itemized, for example, Mr. Speaker. And that is why accountability is required. When we talk of recommending public debt management system to be digitized, is to promote accountability and transparency on usage of money borrowed, that is public debt. Mr. Speaker, if you look at countries like Japan, the debt ratio to GDP stands at over 200%. The debt ratio to GDP of countries like the United States stands at 98%. Our debt ratio to GDP is at 68%. But the only challenge we have, the money that we borrow, we never use it prudently. And that is the point I'm trying to underscore to members and to the country at large. Mr. Speaker, as members just mentioned, if you look at IMF, they have put the threshold for borrowing money at 55%. That is a public debt for development or for developing countries at 50%. But ours now, Mr. Speaker, we are recommending over 55%. And I think we need to be careful, Mr. Speaker, otherwise we are going to burden Kenyans with the debt, which will be extremely unacceptable, considering now the cost of living is above the roof, Mr. Speaker. So in a nutshell, what I would recommend going forward, and as a way of prudent use of our resources or public management, we need to invest in production, Mr. Speaker, so that we can generate raw materials and also finished products to mitigate importation and to be able to reverse the balance of trade, which is currently negative, Mr. Speaker. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, we need to have, a proper system within Treasury, like having one account within Treasury, so that we see no loopholes where our resources could actually disappear and cause to increased debt where the money is not accounted for and the Kenyans continue to feel the pinch, Mr. Speaker. So it's not that I'm trying to attack or dilute the discussion by making references to some of the accusations or where Kenyans would be agitated and say, for example, their resources is not prudently being used. And that is the reason why even these austerity measures were called for by the agencies, Mr. Speaker. So with that, I submit, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Baringo.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And once again, I also want to join members who have spoken before me in supporting and wading my thoughts into this medium-term debt management strategy of 2025. Mr. Speaker, this report has come at a very good time, considering that within the period of our elections and now, we are right in the middle of the term. And this, as a report shows the growth that we have so far undertaken through our economy. And the debt, like most members have said, borrowing is not a problem. But the problem is, where do you put the money after borrowing? Because automatically you will end up, pushing yourself and making sure that you're paid back the money you borrowed. In Kenya today, we are grappling on many things, many vices that contribute to wastages, embezzlement of public funds because of lack of proper infrastructures and proper ways of making sure this money is taken care of. And people who handle money, Mr. Speaker, in this case is Treasury, which the report is suggesting that they must, by all means, make sure that they have this single, single source of making sure that all the MDAs and all parastatals use one channel to, in their, as a single, I can't see the channel to make sure that they are utilizing the money that is given to them. Mr. Speaker, many times I think we lose and don't understand where exactly is the problem coming from when we say money has been mismanaged. But the people who do this work, specifically Treasury, these are people, and someone told me one day that the people who are actually causing most of the corruption in this country, sometimes people think it's politicians, are the people who sit and draft budget lines and give recommendations on what to be budgeted at the end of the day. And these are the people who decide how much debt is borrowed and where this money goes. And when we take care of that single entry, we will be able to curb most of the problems that we have here today. And the interagency committee, as the report indicated, should be enhanced so that we are able to take care and curb most of the problems and the corruption that is a runaway in most of these ministries. Also, we need to check on the public servants who are career civil servants many times, who have worked in these departments over and over, probably up to 10 years, to 20 years, because there is a possibility of budgeted corruption because of the position they sit. They know how much that is needed, but they are the ones who control the budgets because they know, they draw the budget lines. And this is where, if we, as the National Assembly, we will do our oversight to make sure that this report is acted upon to the latter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Tinderet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this report by the Liaison Committee, where I sit as a member. And more importantly, this report is very important because it actually gives strategies on how to manage our debt on the medium term strategy on debt management. Honorable Speaker, this is a policy document which all countries around the globe have. And it is a policy document that has been initiated as a result of world financial crash occasioned by huge debt burden. Across the globe, and even in our homes, in even institutions, we have debt. Unmanaged debt, Mr. Speaker, is very risky, it is costly, it is expensive, it actually depresses economic development. In effect, this particular document or this particular strategy is very good, and I want to laud the National Treasury for having come up with this particular document. The document looks in detail. One, that we actually need to have a detailed report or quarterly reports on the progress on the fiscal consolidation as outlined in the 2025 budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, the budget policy statement of 2025 is a policy document giving direction on how our budget this financial year, 2025-2026, will go. It gives a direction. This particular document is going to form part of the annexures to that particular report, the budget policy statement. But the report that we have in this particular medium term also gives us how can we manage our debt. Our debt has grown over the years, Mr. Speaker. It has grown from about up to now around 11 trillion shillings. And this one is supposed to actually be managed. In managing debt, Mr. Speaker, we need to know where do we borrow from. If we borrow externally, it means the pool of monies is large, and therefore the loans are going to be cheaper. If we borrow locally, two things will happen. One, we shall be competing with the private and the individuals, and therefore makes the interest move up. And two, depress the economic development, the overall development of our economy. By so doing, that's why when you look at this debt, the one we have, at 65 domestic to 35 external, actually it is wrongly skewed. We actually need to have borrowed more externally and borrow less as a government internally, so that we allow wananchi and institutions to borrow within and therefore bring the interest down. Honorable Speaker, we also need to know that why do we borrow? We need to borrow to account. We need to borrow to make sure that any money that we borrow, we need to see it in roads, electricity, we need to see it in terms of health facilities, we need to see it in schools and every other facility that we are borrowing for. That's why in recommendation number 3, the integration of debt management system with the integrated financial management system, or if missed by that 1st May, is very laudable. I want to laud this because any debt that any borrowing, let me use that term, any borrowing that we do engage in, first of all, we need to know how it is utilized, areas it is funding, and more importantly, the value for that particular borrowing. So that by the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, it will actually be of value to Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, the other recommendation which I want to really laud is where many of our institutions, for example, the state agencies, do bank in our local banks, then the national government go and borrow their own money. This one we need to stop. And I want to laud the National Treasury for actually coming out very clearly on this. And it has been recommended that the National Treasury and the Central Bank should ensure that we ensure that that particular item be actually stopped or be actually looked into. Lastly, I also want to say that we need to digitize and make sure that our borrowing is digital.
Why should you have it on 1 minute? Why? Why? Okay, 1 minute.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was saying that because all the itemized loans that we have, we need to actually integrate them into the financial systems so that even as we procure for loans, and I want to allow what the member for Marakwet is said, it has to be public, it has to be public procured. No loan should actually be procured by 2 or 3 people in the National Treasury and agreed upon without understanding the consequences and the risks involved in it. So the general public has to know it, everyone has to know it, and what are the measures, how expensive or how cheaper it is for the sake of our country. I support, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Funyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. As required in the Constitution of Kenya and the PFM Act, at the commencement of any financial year before then, the National Treasury must lay before the House a public debt management strategy. Honorable Speaker, the only concern and fear we have always had, Honorable Speaker, that many times the the debt management strategy that is always presented in the House here might end up just being an empty ritual, just a matter to placate the provisions of the law and to make people, Kenyans, believe that the government is serious about managing debt, which has never been the case. Honorable Speaker, how does debt arise? It's very simple. You budget what you want to spend, you look at the revenues you have or you can collect, the deficit you have to borrow. It therefore then means, Honorable Speaker, that as a country, we are living beyond our means. We are living beyond our means because if our revenue threshold is this level, we should make all attempts, Honorable Speaker, to then undertake programs and projects that are within our means. Granted, in a private sector, debt is always cheaper than equity. But in public sector, it's the reverse. Debt is more expensive than locally generated revenue. So, Honorable Speaker, If you look at the report presented by the Liaison Committee, this is what it reads. Under paragraph 8, a review of the implementation of medium-term management strategies since the year 2020 revealed that there has been a consistent deviation from the approved debt management strategy in the actual borrowing. So, Honorable Speaker, it means two things. One, the Treasury mandarins just bring the document to this House for the sake of it, to comply with the law. Secondly, they deliberately mislead the House, knowing they are not unlikely to achieve, so they can benefit some local banks and some international donors or lenders for their own personal need. So therefore, Honorable Speaker, the country suffers due to incompetencies, ineptitudeness, or basic greed of the people who are in charge at the department. Honorable Speaker, in the financial year 2023-2024, the actual ratio...
No, Mele, the member of Funyula is making his... What is out of order?
Honorable Speaker, when he was speaking, I did not interrupt him, yet he was saying so many things I didn't add.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, the member of Funyula is completely out of order in the sense that, Mr. Speaker, the fact that this paper has been prepared adequately well, and we've given timelines in which the National Treasury is supposed to make sure that they adhere to what we are saying as a liaison committee on the medium-term debt strategy. Then the member is just saying it is lies, it is for the sake of the others, yet we are waiting. If they not comply with it, he's out of order because he's actually giving false lies that this paper is for the sake of the donors.
Yes. And he'll debate using his own words, not yours.
Yes.
Go ahead. He's debating and he'll debate.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Medley says he sits in the Liaison Committee. The report is here. What I'm reading here is what they have actually commented in paragraph 8. It's not my own making. It's not my words. Unless you signed a report you didn't read. Honorable Speaker, how is that possible? Honorable Speaker, and they're saying, Honorable Speaker, in this report, again, our debt ratio to GDP is already at 63%, yet the PFM Act says 55 plus 5. So, Honorable Speaker, are we dealing with illegality here? Is the committee responsible dealing with illegality here, sanitizing the illegality here? Are they just coming to Parliament for the sake of sanitizing illegality? Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, even the report gives a very dim view of the prospects in the future. They say the primary drive of the rising debt stock is the persistent fiscal deficit, influenced by significant infrastructure development needs, increasing debt servicing costs, and exchange rate fluctuations. So, Honorable Speaker, I would have really expected the committee would have gone out of their way to synthesize, discuss, and explain to us how do they...
The member for Segich wants to inform you. Do you want information?
No, I don't want to be informed unless it's a point of order, Chair. Honorable Speaker, you see the power to be informed and the standing order lies with me to accept or not. Unless it's a point of order, then it should be in order, but not point of information.
Okay, go ahead.
Honorable Speaker.
We will allow the Honorable Member for Funyula to finish his...
Yes, we will have to. Honorable Speaker, I hope you will account for the interruptions that I'm given my points to conclude. Honorable Speaker, the issue of public debt in this country has been at the forefront of the discussion for long. And the truth of the matter, Honorable Speaker, public debt in this country is deliberately understated. That's the truth of the matter. Honorable Speaker, even if you went to any office and asked, give me a schedule or a register of public debt, nobody knows. I sit in Public Accounts Committee, and some of these things that come up will shock you, Honorable Speaker. So indeed, that's why I'm trying to bring the point that probably this document, we need to have a different paradigm shift, how we are going to develop it, discuss it, and make it a document that can guide discussion in this House. Honorable Speaker, in the current financial year, the 2025-2026, the deficit is about 831 billion. Again, how would you have a deficit? It's almost a third of your budget. What kind of budgeting is this? Honorable Speaker, domestic will be about 540 billion, external 290 billion. Yet again, Honorable Speaker, when you look at this, they're not so sure they're going to borrow that money because many times they have failed to achieve that balance and have ended up borrowing domestically. Honorable Speaker, as we talk about this, we are forgetting the issue of pending bills. It is extremely unfair. It's extremely undeserving. It's extremely unfair to the people of Kenya to fail to account pending bills as part of public debt. It is a public debt. Yet the strategy paper here that has no mention at all about pending bills. Are we being sincere and truthful to the people of Kenya? We are not. This Kenya Kwanza government, Honorable Speaker, the debt that we have, Honorable Speaker, we could actually liquidate it using our own resources. Honorable Speaker, we hold Harambes to do irrelevant things, yet we cannot hold Harambes to meet our development needs. Are we sincere to the people of Kenya, or just a rip-off to make sure the people of Kenya remain in abject poverty and there's no development at all? With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support because it's required by the law, but with reservations.
Thank you. More for the best. I don't know why you just walked in. He's been kicked.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Since we started.
I stand, Honorable Speaker. I stand, Honorable Speaker, to support the Liaison Committee consideration of the 2025 medium-term debt management strategy as laid in the House. Honorable Speaker, when you look at this debt management strategy, we talk about external borrowing as being relatively cheaper than domestic debt. And this is due to the share of concessional loans from multilateral lenders, such as the World Bank and our development partners. Indeed, 54% of the total external debt portfolio is concessional and significantly contributes to the sustainability of the Kenya's debt. Honorable Speaker, my colleague Honorable Undo is misled the public that you can do harambes to pay external debts. I think that there is no country that has ever done a harambe to pay an external debt. And I think that was just, I presume from somebody of his caliber, that was just a joke. I think he must have said it in a light touch. Honorable Speaker, there is no country in the world that does not borrow. Japan, US, any other of the developed countries, all countries borrow and they have debts. In our view, Honorable Speaker, we noted that the external commercial borrowing is relatively expensive compared to the concessional loans, as I have already mentioned. And therefore, various risk measures, including paying off of some of the most expensive loans and exploring cheaper debt instruments, such as green bonds, are being considered in this report. Following the review of the 2025 MDDS, the committee observed that the government will borrow 831.1 billion, which is equivalent to the fiscal deficit in the 2025 budget policy statement. This amount borrowed, Honorable Speaker, will be sourced from both domestic and external sources at a ratio of 65-35 respectively. Honorable Speaker, to mitigate growing risk of domestic debt interest payments and reduce the tendency of the government borrowing funds held by public entities, the National Treasury should deploy the Treasury single account for all MDS, parastatals, and public funds, as being put by various members who have spoken, among them the Deputy Speaker who moved this motion, Honorable Majority Leader also said the same, and even the members of the Budget Committee, the Honorable Makali Muli, he's also stressed this issue of single treasury account. And I think this is the direction in which we should be able to go. As we speak, Honorable Speaker, from the control of budget yesterday, who said she had been in Tanzania. Tanzania is already using it. And so I think it's a high time as a country that we also deploy the same. And members having raised issues about transparency and accountability in the domestic borrowing, Honorable Speaker, I think the committee has already made some recommendations, among them that the Cabinet Secretary of National Treasury and Economic Planning should form a working committee to establish criteria for assessing the effective utilization of borrowed funds by ministries, departments, and agencies to establish the registrar of government securities pursuant to Section 55 of the PFM Act. And secondly, to record the debt in the register, the details on the utilization of the borrowed funds, including the set of projects funded from the proceeds of infrastructure bonds and any other bond, that, so that to make it much easier for people to be able to can look at the register and be able to access that information. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support.
The member for Kitui Rural. Honorable Mboni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me say on outset, I support the report. And Mr. Speaker, this is the second one, I think, in this parliament since this parliament started. And it's very good that we actually know what is our debt stock. Debt is not a bad thing. No country has ever developed without borrowing. You realize that developing countries are more indebted than developing countries, with Japan having the highest debt to GDP at present value of 256. US is at 123% of GDP at present value. And most of the countries, developing countries, are below 100. But they cry more because the loans they took, either they are expensive, and also the way they utilize the loans. Most of the loans went to wastage. And therefore, paying becomes a problem. Mr. Speaker, going forward, the loans which we should take from this country should go into projects or programs with high economic and social returns, so that it becomes easier for us to pay because of the impact they are going to bring to this country. Mr. Speaker, looking at the report, one thing which is worrying is the Kenya loans mix. When you talk about domestic loan in this country, is 65% from the report, and external is at 5%. Mr. Speaker, domestic loans have their own effects, a very serious effect. One, the interest rates are very high. Two, their repayment period is very short. Most of them are 5 years or that kind of thing. And the more critical thing is that they crowd out private sector borrowing. Now, if the rates, for example, last year, the rates, the treasury bonds, the rates were around 20%, 16, 18%. And if you go to the bank because of that, the banks will increase their interest rates because it's easier, there is less risk borrowing from government than private sector. Banks giving to government than private sector. And therefore, they increase their interest rates. When they increase their interest rates, the bank cannot borrow, they cannot invest, they cannot expand their businesses or start up their businesses. And that has a serious effect on economic growth. Mr. Speaker, we need to move to more concession loans, which are have low interest rates and long repayment periods, so that at least we can benefit from the loan and desist from borrowing. Mr. Speaker, how did we find ourselves in this situation? One thing is the way we do our budgets. We have always having a budget with high deficits. The moment this parliament approves a budget with a deficit, you are already approving borrowing because the deficit has to be financed. So we need to move, and the deficit stands around 17% of our budget. So we need to move more to balanced budgets so that we reduce our borrowing. The other thing we need to do is to reduce the use of Article 223. These are provisions in financial management which have really been misused. by Mandarin's treasury, you realize that every year we are spending on this article, using this article, between 100 and 200 billion per year. You know, this is money which is not budgeted. And immediately you spend that kind of money, you are also affecting the projects which are, which are budgeted for. Mr. Speaker, it's a pity that some withdrawals on debt payment are done manually. Last week we met with the control budget, and she was saying that she's approving 115 payments, debt payment every month, every week, actually every week. And some of them are done manually. And she has not really time to go through all those payments. So I think it's important for this recommendation that is to actually automate withdrawal debts, so that at least we can have we increase our accountability on debt repayment. Mr. Speaker, the other thing is fiscal consolidation. This is a song which I've sung for so many years, and it's high time we strictly follow fiscal.
30 seconds.
It's high time we strictly implement fiscal consultation so that we can reduce unnecessary trips, hospitalities which are in our budgets, and general wastage which we have been facing. Mr. Speaker, the single treasury account of our FDS. I was reading somewhere last week, and the money which we are collecting for affordable housing, that money, affordable housing, it has earned 2 billion shillings from government securities. You know, because if we have fiscal, this single treasury account, the government is going to have money to use without paying interest. So this is something which we need really to implement, and the treasury should not actually be telling us when they are going to implement. Implementation should have been yesterday, not even today.
Thank you. Member for Cliffy North.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, that you give me this opportunity to contribute to the medium-term debt management strategy. One, Honourable Speaker, it's high time that this country implements the single treasury account. That way, we are assured that government money is government money and we do not have to pay interest on it. First, Honourable Speaker, there are times when you have government actually borrows its own money, where you have money scattered in different banks. Government goes out there, say they want a loan, and what the bank does is just accumulate government money, gives it to government, and then charges interest on it. And that's how we continue to grow the debt in this country. So it is very important that we implement the single treasury account to avoid the situation where we are actually banks. By the way, if you look at domestic debt versus external debt today, the domestic debt is higher. But if you ask yourself, who is actually and banks are making exorbitant profits, and you ask yourself, these profits while other Kenyans don't have money and there's little borrowing in the country, but actually you hear a bank has made a profit of 14 billion, and you ask yourself why? Because they have been using government. It's actually government giving them those exorbitant profits, and yet those profits that they're declaring is actually government money that they have used to loan out to government to make more money from government. And therefore, it is very important, Honourable Speaker, to ensure that the single treasury account is maintained. Secondly, Honourable Speaker, on the same issue of debt, I heard the Honourable John Badi the other day. I listened to him, he was on Spice FM on the Situation Room, and he was discussing about Kenya's debt, and he's looking at the Eurobonds. He's looking at it up to 2034. That we are already indebted up to 2034 as a country because of how we are managing our debt. That what we are doing...
2036.
2036, actually, 2036. If you look at it, Honourable Speaker, what we are doing is we dig a hole to cover another hole, then dig a bigger hole to cover another even deeper hole. And yet looking at the many projects that are in this country, you have a lot of incomplete projects that you cannot take propriety on, and yet we have borrowed. Yesterday, if you looked at what Citizen was airing, and you're seeing that the country has borrowed 6 billion. The project went halfway. It was not completed. Then now, for you to complete, you have to borrow. So the cost of the project goes up by like 30% because of the delay. But for you to get that 30%, you have to borrow for you to be able to complete a project that should have been completed 3 years ago. What does that mean? We cannot manage our debt because of delay on projects or over ambitious on certain projects. And therefore, managing Kenya's debt will be a challenge. Look at the many projects that were abandoned because they were started all over the country during the previous regime. Very many projects were started. Now, this country is trying to look for money to finish those projects. But the cost of that project ab initio is different from the cost of project 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So what happens? Government incurs cost. Actually, what government has done is that you have a project that was actually initially supposed to be completed in 1 year for 6 billion. But it is being completed in 3 years at 12 billion, double the cost. Honorable Speaker, that is one thing that we must do in terms of starting projects. When we are starting projects, we must start a project that we must finish. Otherwise, we'll continue to borrow to cover projects that are unfinished. The third thing, Honorable Speaker, is where we borrow from commercial banks. You know, these Exim banks and all that, instead of multilateral or bilateral loans. We have been hit very hard by commercial loans, Honorable Speaker, as against multilateral and bilateral. The multilateral and bilateral loans are cheap loans, things that we should be going for. But what we have seen is people have preferred to go for commercial loans that are very, very expensive. And the more you delay on it, they accrue interest, and Honorable Speaker, it becomes very difficult to manage. I do not know at what time we will really get hold. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, if you allow me, if you give me 1 minute, lastly. In the previous regime, there are institutions that were used to borrow money. And you ask parastatals, you know you have a debt that was incurred on your behalf of 100 billion. But you don't know how that money was borrowed, and that money never came to us. How are we going to manage that? So, Honorable Speaker, as we consolidate all these things that we are looking at, we need as a parliament to put our foot down and say every coin that must be borrowed be sanctioned by this House. If this House starts sanctioning the loans that we are borrowing, Honorable Speaker, we'll get hold of our loan portfolio and we'll be able to manage the debt of this country. I thank you.
Well said. The Honorable Member, this is Honorable Irene Mayaka.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also stand to support this particular report because, Honorable Speaker, this, first of all, is within its time that we need to discuss this particular report. But having said that, Honorable Speaker, I've looked at the strategy that has been presented by the committee and some of the recommendations they have given. Like, for example, the fact that we now want to automate the system and integrate it to IFMIS. I think this is something that is way beyond time. It should have happened sooner than this. But all the same, it's still a very good idea. The only caution I want to throw in there is when we are doing this integration, let's not immediately grandfather the current manual system until we are certain that this actually works. Because the danger of doing that is if you integrate the two systems and it doesn't work, then it throws you back to square one. Also, Honorable Speaker, I have seen another recommendation that even as we are implementing this, that there'll be close scrutiny and monitoring on a quarterly basis for this particular report, which again, Honorable Speaker, is very important because when you do that, we will be able to tell whether or not it is working. We'll be able to tell whether or not the new ratios that are being suggested as being introduced in terms of increasing the domestic borrowing vis-a-vis the external, we'll be able to tell whether or not this is actually working. And where I'm coming from, Honorable Speaker, with that is because I have seen that one of the recommendations is that it includes a close look at the proceeds of the infrastructure bond. Honorable Speaker, what we need to be aware of, and the reports that we also need to be furnished as a House, is the reports of how our infrastructure bond especially is doing in the local market. We need to know the extent of borrowing that local investors, Kenyans, are actually doing. so that we are able to know whether or not this is working. I have seen the introduction of also some of the alternative financial measures, like the linked bonds, the debt swaps, the diaspora bonds, the ECG bonds, and all that, which is also good. But also, Honorable Speaker, even when we are suggesting this, we need to be very aware and cognizant of whether or not this has worked in other economies. And if we are borrowing this particular practice, then we also need to match ourselves against the countries where this has succeeded. Because financial prudency, success of that normally is not something that is unique from different environments. It's something that if it has worked in one particular place, then you know you can borrow the ideas that they've used. And Honorable Speaker, there's a very common saying that we say that there is nothing wrong with copying a good cut. It's very much in order. Honorable Speaker, I also just want to speak about the monitoring aspect of it in terms of the Ministry of National Treasury, which has also been suggested as at the 31st May of 2025, in terms of just reviewing whether or not the debt utilization and the debt procurement process is actually working, which, Honorable Speaker, is also good. My only fear is that we need to also be very careful that we are not overwhelming one particular department with doing all this at the same time. These are all very good measures, but you also must be very, very cognizant of what the effects will be. Finally, Honorable Speaker, I just want to say that the only way that this will actually work is if we have strict fiscal discipline within our systems, and also that we adopt the appropriate consolidated measures for us to be able to make sure that this works. Having said that, Honorable Speaker, I do support this report and I submit. I thank you.
Thank you. The member from Mbeere North.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support this report and say that the public management, the public liability management in this country has been not well managed for quite some time. Whether it is domestic liabilities or international liabilities, Mr. Speaker, they have not been well managed, and probably that's why we have been in the serious problem which we have been facing of borrowing again and again and again until we have reached to very, very high debts of about 11 trillion at the moment. Mr. Speaker, the recommendations forwarded by the committee in this House are promising because we are looking at consolidation, or fiscal consolidation, to ensure that we move from where we are at the moment of about 65 point something percent to be within the recommended percentage in terms of the present value terms of 55%, plus or minus 5% by 2028, Honorable Speaker. For this to be achieved, quite a number of things must be done, especially by the National Treasury, by Central Bank of Kenya, as well as by the Controller of Budget. And as the report says, the automation, to automate the debts service payment from the consolidated fund is one of the key recommendations, so that we can be able to monitor how the withdrawals are done. There have been many rumors on the social media, on our media, that a lot of money has been withdrawn manually, not through automated ways, and we are not sure whether this money has been utilized properly. And we are talking about huge amount of money. With such kind of recommendation, Honorable Speaker, it will get rid of many speculation which may come as a result, of course, of the nation.
My good friend, Honorable Ruko of Siakago, I know his place. He has talked about rumors. I do not know whether that's parliamentary because it's a house of record. Parliament is a house of records, not a house of rumors. Can he probably rephrase instead of using the word rumors? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Speaker, one of the daily said that there was manual withdrawals of about 1.3 trillion. That information is not confirmed. Those are just rumors, street rumors out there, Honorable Speaker. And for us to be able to get rumors not published in our media, automation of debt service payment will go a long way in ensuring that rumors don't find their way in media. Because it will be verifiable, it will be not only verifiable, but even open source. We can be able to get that information when we request for it. Also, Mr. Speaker, this report talks about ensuring that a single account is implemented so that we may not continue, government may not continue borrowing its own money from our financial institution, from our domestic, from our banks, local banks. Mr. Speaker, as you have noted, if there is a sector which makes money year in, year out, at huge amounts of profits, is the banking sector. And all of them, they fight very hard for the government institution to open accounts in different banks. And I think we have to also be serious, Mr. Speaker. We have seen many counties opening 30 accounts, 40 accounts. Some of them, they have even 100 accounts in different banks. Just that the banks can continue making money out of the public resources.
You got 30 seconds, please.
Public resources. I think the consolidated single account will go a long way in ensuring that we have, we manage our local resources, public resources in the most prudent way. Finally, Mr. Speaker, it has come to a point where those who are managing public resources in a bad way, we should demand them to step aside. In case we have a report, and there are many reports in this House, where public resources are mismanaged by senior government officials, it is high time for them to step aside, as we used to see during Kibaki administration. Mr. Speaker, with those remarks, I support this report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All members, there being no further interest on the motion, I call upon the mover to reply. The Honorable Gladys Boss.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And before I proceed to reply, I would just first want to thank all the members who have contributed very enthusiastically to this particular motion. I think this shows great interest, and as we know, it's the first time in Kenya that we now have a midterm debt management strategy that is brought to Parliament. If you remember, prior to 2021, this was not the case. So we have made progress as a country that as legislators, we are interested in knowing the levels of our debt, the way they are being managed, and the utilization, and also to know how much at any particular stage as we undertake the budget policy statement, and also as we prepare to have the budget and appropriations bill. But I also want to use this opportunity to say that I think some members actually thought that it was a gloomy picture that was painted. But I must say that listening yesterday to the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning, Honorable John Badi, I felt positive and hopeful as a Kenyan that our country is going in the right direction. If you see the way they explained about how they've managed the debt from the time when they came into office up to now, you can see that there's positive levels. And we also must commend him because he took his time to explain to us that and also admit that, yes, it is not at the prescribed 55%. But he went on to say it's at 63, we admit, but this is the strategies that we have to put in place to ensure that we bring it back to 55. And they have a very clear roadmap of how by 2028 it will be back at 55. I think I would have been worried if we had a situation like used to happen before where we didn't even know what levels we are. And I remember proudly so that it was when I was chairperson of the delegated committee that we actually set the ceiling at 55%. And we have made progress that now we're being reported to that. So we must commend the National Treasury for being honest about it, but also telling us that they have clear measures of how they are reducing it, but also agreeing that they will bring the results of the updates at specific times on dates that we agreed on. So we have dates in July, we have dates in May that they have confirmed to us. They've also told us measures. They also, were able to agreeable on discussing measures they can put in place to ensure that there's better governance and better accountability and transparency in the way we utilize not just our own resources from revenue, but also those that come from from debts. And that is why they gave us very good measures. One is to have a single treasury account. And I think that is progress. And hence the reason why we were willing that we are seeking to ask this House to allow them up to 2028, because they've told us if we have the single treasury account, if we have the accrual system, if we have the zero budgeting, if we have make sure that all our debts go through the digital system, then they will be able to tighten and ensure that we don't have any more losses of monies that we have borrowed. But also the undertaking that they will report to Parliament within 15 days of implementation to give us a register of all debts, how much are they using to service the debts, but also how the debts were used, in which projects, so that we can be able to also have an opportunity as Parliament to interrogate and say, I think that is not good use of borrowed money, so that it doesn't happen the following year. And also, they've given us the undertaking that they will not make any variation of this mid-term debt management strategy without coming to Parliament first. And I think with those assurances, it paints a much more positive outlook than we've ever had. In the last Parliament, we were not in this place. It was a back and forth all the time with the National Treasury. I remember when Uhuru.Raila was the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury, my committee had altercations with him because he could not disclose how much was owed. Then he finally said he's going to come back and bring it to us in 14 days. It never happened. So I think there is progress, that there was full disclosure of what our revenues are and what our deficit is, and that they are borrowing to cover the deficit. But they also said they've also done something that has not, that things may improve, because first of all, they've not negotiated their eighth review with the IMF. So that might change. We might have some more concession on loans, which will bring down our repayment levels. They also said that they still have an opportunity that we might increase our revenue. So what they've done is given a very underestimated revenue projection, because they said they don't want to make the mistake that was made last time, where we had a very ambitious revenue projection, then it didn't happen, then we were stuck. So I think with those honorable members, I think like I said, I feel much more confident about the fiscal health of our country. And with that, I beg to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. A decision on this motion will be made the next time it's in the order paper for the obvious reasons. Next order. Honorable Mayaka, what's out of order?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I'm standing pursuant to Standing Order number 35, because I've seen in the order paper what we are discussing next is a very important and crucial motion, but we do not have sufficient quorum for that.
Okay, order number 35 doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what is to be discussed next. It stands on its own. So I order the quorum bell be rung for the next 5 minutes. Is the quorum bell run 10 minutes or 5 minutes? Okay. Order, honorable members, order. Order. Honorable members, the time being 7:02 p.m., this House stands adjourned until tomorrow, Thursday, the 6th of March 2025 at 2:30 p.m.